Okay, let us begin. We are starting a new series called Dating and Marriage. It's up to you guys. It's up to you guys what you want to do. If you want to split between the guys and girls or just do it all together, it's up to you guys. These are the two discussion questions, so go for it. Over the last 40 years, empirical descriptions of marriage health and satisfaction in the US have been in steady decline. The divorce rate is nearly twice the rate it was in 1960. In 1970, 98% of all births were to married people, but today only 60% are. So about 40% are out of wedlock and are out of marriage. So basically that's telling you less and less people are getting married as well. 72% of American adults were married in 1960, but only 50 were in 2008. Okay. So not really a surprise, probably, right? For most of you guys? All right. All of this shows an increasingly wariness and pessimism about marriage in our culture. And that is especially true of young adults. They believe their chances of having a good marriage are not great. And even if the marriage is stable, there is, in their view, the horrifying perspective that it will become sexually boring. This is why many aim for something in the middle between marriage and hookups. Okay, cohabitation. They get to still have sexual encounters or have somebody with them, living with them, but they don't have to feel like they're stuck in a marriage. No commitment. Does that make sense? Okay. So the basic idea is a lot of young people nowadays, they say, what's the point of marriage? Okay, why lock myself up to a marriage where probably it's not going to go well anyways? So might as well not get married or just cohabitate, live with somebody. And if it works out well, it works out well. If it doesn't work out well, then that's what it is. Sean?
This practice has grown exponentially in the last 3 decades. Today, more than half of all people live together before getting married. In 1960, virtually no one did. Driving this practice are several widespread beliefs. One is the assumption that most marriages are unhappy.
Right. So again, the idea is people who are married, they're not happy anyways. It's hard. So why get married anyways? How many of you guys, just raise your hand, have a negative perspective of marriage? Okay, so majority of you guys probably have a positive perspective then? Okay. Interesting. So let's continue going. All right.
Belief in the desirability and goodness of marriage was once universal, but that is no longer true. So what happened? Paradoxically, it may be that the pessimism comes from a new kind of unrealistic idealism about marriage, born of a significant shift in our culture's understanding of the purpose of marriage.
Right. So even about 100 years ago, a lot of people got married. But this recent phenomenon, people are not getting married anymore, or people are not very excited about marriage. So basically, what's going on? Why is it that we're so pessimistic about marriage? Okay? And he's basically giving you a little bit of hint, which is it's because our shift in the purpose of marriage has changed. That's why. Does that make sense? Yeah. Before, we thought of marriage as this kind of a thing, and now we think of marriage as something different. And therefore, now we are not getting married. Does that make sense? Okay, we'll get to that. If you guys do have questions, please stop me. Ajul?
Legal scholar John Wyatt points out that in Western civilization, there have been several competing views of what the purpose of marriage should be.
Yeah. So this is within Western civilization, okay? Okay. So mostly in America and Europe. All right. So basically, there was one thought about what marriage should look like, and now it has shifted quite a bit. All right.
The first was the Christian perspective. They taught that the purpose of marriage was solemn bond, designed to help each party subordinate individual. Christians understood marriage to be given by God, not merely for themselves, but to benefit the entirety of humanity. In particular, lifelong marriage was seen as creating the only kind of social stability in which children could grow and thrive.
Okay. So a couple of things, right? So first one, there's character development. So the idea is, because of the whole Christian idea is, you need to learn to submit to your desires. You need to learn to grow, right? Because in the Christian world, we believe that we're all sinners. So therefore, by living with each other, then we can actually grow, in the sense that we can see that we can't just do whatever we want anymore, right? Or the marriage is not going to last for a very long time. There's sharing, there's negotiating, there's being aware that there's other people's needs. That helps you to deny yourself. Does that make sense? Right? The second thing is, it's good for the community, right? If there's strong marriages, then it's good for the kids, and it's good for the community as well. Does that make sense? All right. During the Enlightenment, things began to shift. Now, do you guys know what Enlightenment is? It's basically this time, okay, when basically before the 17th century, basically church, what I mean is the Catholic Church, because that was the only church back then, they had all the power. Or they had, even though they didn't have all the power, they basically had all the power. So it's basically whatever the religious people said, you listen to them, even the politicians. But the thing is, because they had a lot of power, of course, a lot of corruption happened. The churches, they didn't do a lot of good things. Because of that, people started to say, okay, we're done with the church. Forget church. Does that make sense? And so this is what we call the Enlightenment period, where they basically said, the basic idea is church, religion, God, they're all cancer. Okay? They're not the answer to our problems. Instead, science, humans, our knowledge, we're the answer. Does that make sense? And that's what we call Enlightenment period. Okay? And again, this is when like Charles Darwin and like Freud, all of those things start developing a lot more. And this push away from religion happens a lot, okay? All right. Things began to shift. Now, the meaning of life came to be seen as the fruit of the freedom of the individual to choose the life that most fulfills him or herself personally. Okay? So meaning in life for human beings have changed. Before, it was about being devoted to God, or serving God. But now they said, forget God, forget religion. It's about my freedom. As long as I am happy, as long as I am satisfied, that's all that matters. Does that make sense? So shift has happened, big shift, okay? So instead of finding meaning through self-denial, binding oneself to the duties of marriage and family, marriage was now defined as finding emotional and sexual fulfillment and self-actualization. Does that make sense? Because my meaning in life changed, what I look for in marriage also changed. That makes sense, right? Before, I said I get married so that I can devote myself to God better, or my character development, or for the community. Now I say my purpose in life is, as long as I am happy, I am satisfied, that's all that matters. So when I go into a marriage now, my thought is, how is this person going to fulfill my emotional, sexual desires? Does that make sense?
Marriage is now seen as a contract between two parties for mutual individual growth and satisfaction. In this view, married persons marry for themselves, not to fulfill responsibilities to God or society.
Okay. So again, the reason why we marry now is for ourselves, individual. Individuals are more important than community, groups.
In short, marriage used to be a public institution for the common good, and now it is a private arrangement for the satisfaction of the individuals. Marriage used to be about us, but now it is about me.
Yeah. So before it would have been we marriage, right? We get married so that we can both benefit, the world can benefit, our kids get benefits, our community could be better, but now doesn't matter. What's most important is my satisfaction. Am I happy or not? Let's go into discussion group really quickly. What do you guys think? Does this kind of make sense? Any question, thoughts? Go for it.
The first model.
Yeah.
Marriage is like they want to.
Because it's all about the reason.
Okay, do you guys have questions before we move on or clarifications? Let us continue then. All right. Why is it that people won't make a commitment? In a significant study from 2002 by the National Marriage Project entitled Why Men Won't Commit, many men said they wouldn't marry until they found the perfect soulmate, someone very compatible. That's why they're not committing, because they haven't found the perfect soulmate. But what does that mean? What do they mean? What do these people mean, at least, when they're talking about this perfect soulmate or this idea of compatibility? They say two things. Number one, the first factor is physical attractiveness and sexual chemistry. The most obvious theme in the interviews with recent divorced people was how crucial it was that they had great sex. One woman said, I married my husband because he was hot, but he started putting on weight and stopped caring. We only had sex once a week because he wasn't hot, he wasn't desirable, so she wasn't having enough sex with him. There was no urgency nor tension that made or makes sex so great. So the idea is, in the beginning, I was so sexually attractive or physically attracted. There was chemistry. But now, you get comfortable, you gain weight, you burp, you fart. Then, there's no more of that chasing or no more of that chemistry, butterfly feelings anymore. So therefore, Number two,
They said that compatibility.
So you think that burp and fart is not attractive?
sorry, I didn't.
So you're saying like
Uh-huh.
burping and farting is not attractive anymore?
I guess I'm just saying, in the beginning, maybe they might find it cute or sexy, or it's like, but once you get married, you're like, dude,
Oh yeah.
come on, man.
Uh,
I'm just saying, not just with farting, of course. It could be even like you might marry a guy because he's so strong and like manly, and he's like so like emotionally stable. But once you get married, you're like, man, this guy, he's like emotionless or cold, right? So I mean, it could have been good things. It's just when you get married and you spend a lot of time with that person, you realize, oh, it's different. You're gonna say something?
how long did it date for that? Like, how long did it date for a long time?
Yeah, I guess some people they would know this more, and that's why some people they just stay dating for a long time, perhaps, and they don't like marriage as much.
Let's see how you can manage that. Like, how are you supposed to know what you're gonna get tired of before you get tired of it?
Yeah, sure. That is true. But that's because they believe they just haven't found the perfect person. If you found the perfect person, then you will forever be sexually and physically attracted to them. Okay? Number 2, they said, compatibility above all meant someone who showed a willingness to take them as they are and not change them. More than a few men express resentment at women who try to change them. Some of the men describe marital compatibility as finding a woman who will fit into their life. So that's what they mean by compatibility. Not like personality compatibility or like our interest compatibility, or they're talking about like life compatibility, as in like we just fit perfectly together where you don't change me, I don't change you. Compatibility. Does that make sense? So they're like the perfect piece to the puzzle that was missing in my life. A woman who will fit into my life. If you are truly compatible, one man said, you don't have to change. That's what they mean by compatibility. Does that make sense? Okay. So again, that's why people, men and women, they're not willing to commit as much. Because again, they're saying, no, I need to find the perfect person. Okay? The perfect soulmate who will fit perfectly in my life. Does that make sense? And that's why people are not getting married.
I told Jenny that.
Don't try to change me.
Oh, man,
Stop trying to change me. Exactly. All right. Irony, pessimistic idealism. Germs?
Both men and women today want a marriage in which they can receive emotional and sexual satisfaction from someone who will simply let them be themselves. They want a spouse who is fun, intellectually stimulating, sexually attractive, with many common interests, who, on top of it, are supportive of personal goals and of the way they are living.
Okay. Sounds perfect, doesn't it? They're physically, sexually attractive. On top of that, they're intellectually stimulating. And they're also fun on top of that. And on top of that, they never tell you what to do. Okay? Perfect woman or perfect man, right? They support you in everything that you do. Absolutely. 100%. 100%.
Like movies and stuff.
1000%.
But
But also our movies and media are controlled by our culture as well. Our culture is really built upon our philosophies and what we believe about the metaphysical questions of life.
So, but isn't there maybe you'll answer this later, but like, isn't there like some truth to that? Because I mean, if people have two people from two different cultures, it's gonna make their marriage harder, right? If they're two very different personalities, it's gonna be more difficult. And so, like, isn't there some like weight to finding someone that's compatible to you?
Right. No. So I'm not saying this is a negative thing by all means. We're just saying we're not even saying this is right or wrong. We're just saying this is what people want now. Yeah. And this is one of the reasons why people are not getting married. That's all we're saying as of right now, so far. You guys want to talk a little bit, or you guys want to continue on? Okay, let's continue on. Question, another question?
But then let's say like parents get married and they have kids, right? But then those the kids see their parents, like how they're acting, and then
Oh, like dad likes mom.
So they might say something like this. They might say it's because dad or mom, they didn't marry the right people, or they settled, or they were in arranged marriages. But now we get to choose, so we could choose the right ones. So they could believe that. In short, Julie, if you could read it for us.
in short, you are looking for someone who will not require openness to change. You are searching, therefore, for an ideal person, healthy, interesting, was like. Never before in history has there been a society so idealistic in what they are seeking in themselves.
Okay. Okay, let's talk really quickly. Why don't you guys get into your group really quickly? Okay, do you think this is you? Okay, go for it.
I know, like your criteria, I guess, like how you see it.
Well, you
Oh, really? I guess for me, I'm always like being nervous. Like, am I acceptable to that? Is what I was.
Yeah.
All right, let's get it started. Grace?
It seems almost oxymoronic to believe that this new idealism has led to a new pessimism about marriage. But this newer view of marriage actually puts a crushing burden of expectation on marriage and on spouses in a way that more traditional understandings never did. And it leaves us desperately trapped between both unrealistic beliefs and terrible fears about marriage.
Okay. So do you guys understand what this is saying? So in essence, what it's saying is marriage itself is not the problem. It's not marriage that's a problem. It's the people who are getting married that's the problem. Why? Because purpose of marriage, we believe certain things about what marriage should be. Okay, before, if marriage filled this part, now we say it has to fill this part. But that was never what marriage was meant to be. But now, because we have such an unrealistic high expectation, again, high expectation itself is a good thing, but unrealistic, that's the bad thing. Because we have an unrealistic view of marriage and what marriage needs to be, that's why we never get married. Because we see people and we're like, they never look happy. But they're not happy not because marriage sucks, but because they go in with wrong expectations. Does that make sense? Because again, to find someone like this, it's almost impossible. Or you might find a person like this, but that doesn't mean that you're like this. So, this is ironic. Older views of marriage are considered to be traditional, oppressive, while the newer view of me marriage seems so liberating, right? For example, if I told you guys all of your mom or your dad, they're going to choose who you're going to marry. Okay? If I told you that, what would you think? You don't like that. You don't like that. Yeah, that's oppressive. Okay? But now for us, we go, yeah, I get to choose the person I want to marry. If I want to divorce, I divorce. I choose. But now because of that choice, actually, we're even more fearful. Yeah? Yet it is the newer view that has led to a steep decline in marriage and to an oppressive sense of hopelessness with regard to it. Does that make sense? So it's our now new expectation that is actually killing marriage itself. So it's us that's killing marriage, not marriage who are killing us. Okay? Does that make sense? All right.
To conduct a me marriage requires two completely well-adjusted, happy individuals with very little in the way of emotional neediness of their own or character flaws that need a lot of work. The problem is there is almost no one like that out there to marry. A marriage based not on self-denial but on self-fulfillment will require a low or no maintenance partner who meets your needs while making almost no claims on you. Simply put, today people are asking for too much in the marriage partner.
Right. Again, this makes zero sense. Okay? Imagine a friendship that says, okay, I'm gonna be friends with you, but you could never tell me what to do, nor try to change me, but you have to only support me. Okay? Do you think you could be friends with that person for a long time? You can never tell me what your opinions are.
Oh,
Okay? you have to always support me.
But I don't think that's true either.
Is that going to work? Would that ever work? Okay, so what makes you think that's going to work in a marriage? So what I'm saying is, if you don't even want a friendship like that, what makes you think you're going to want a wife or a husband like that? But the problem is, that's exactly what we expect from our spouse. We expect them to support us in everything that we do, never to criticize us, and for them to be happy all the time, okay? Stimulating all the time, physically attractive all the time. Okay? Again, that's why we're never happy in our marriage. Or we never get married. Or the people we're dating, we're never happy. Because we have unrealistic expectations. Again, I'm not saying have no expectations. That's not what we're saying. Okay? But again, the idea is, there's many reasons why people are not getting married, but again, one of the reasons is because we have unrealistic expectations from us. Okay, any questions, thoughts before we move on? Julie, were you going to say something? No. All right, solution. Germs?
What then is the solution? The Christian answer to this is that no two people are compatible. Professor Howells famously made this point. We always marry the wrong person. Why? Because marriage brings you into more intense proximity to another human being than any other relationship can. Therefore, the moment you marry someone, you and your spouse begin to change. So you don't know, you can't know who your spouse will actually be in the future until you get.
All right. Okay, so the idea is you never marry a perfect person. Okay? There is no such thing as a perfect person. Now, there might be a perfect person when you marry them, but the problem is all of us change. Okay, you think you were the same 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago? Okay, unless you said yes to all of that, then what does that mean? That means you are going to change 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. Okay? If not the way you think, physically you will change 5, 10, 15 years from now. Okay? So what I'm saying is, let's say your wife or husband is perfect looking. But do you think that person will stay perfect looking 20 years, 30 years, 40 years from now? So what it's basically saying is, you could marry the right person, but the person is always changing, so as you are. Not only that, professor says, when you get so intimately close with somebody, that changes you. And you change them as well. So this idea that this person has to be perfect, has to fit perfectly into my life, again, that could work when you get married, but that doesn't mean that it'll be the same after you get married. Things change. You don't, like for me and Grace, we've been married for about 4 years now, but we're expecting 5 years, but we're expecting a baby soon. Do you think that's going to make a difference in our marriage? Absolutely. Okay. So again, the first thing we have to understand, this is more of a sociological perspective, but the idea is that there is no such thing as perfect soulmate, or in the sense that like you fit perfectly together, because we're always changing. So it's like our shapes are always changing. Okay, so in that sense, a person might fit together in one stage, but might not afterwards.
Over the years, you will go through seasons in which you have to learn to love the person who you don't marry, who is something of a stranger. You will have to make changes that you don't want to make, and so will your spouse. The journey may eventually take you into a stronger, joyful marriage, but it is not because your marriage married the perfectly compatible person. The person doesn't exist.
Yeah. So as we change, then we change and we realize we're changing, and then we make adjustments, We realize, oh, in this part of life, I need to support her. In this part of life, she needs to support me. And we help each other. That's what makes a marriage beautiful. That's what it's basically saying.
But then wouldn't the change kind of be temporary? Then they go back to their old habits, hopeful, and go back to like
Yeah, no, you're right that there's definitely certain things that are just temporary, but there's a lot of other things where it's very permanent. Right? So for example, let's say you get in a really bad car accident, or you lose a job, or you lose all your money. That will temporarily change some things, right? Or it might because of traumatic events, it might change you permanently too, right? So again, circumstances of life will change things. And so in that sense, he's saying at the end of it, they're using the word stranger, but you're not marrying a stranger, but it's going to almost seem like a stranger because the person you were before and now are totally different. But I mean, people say it all the time, like wife and husband, they say that all the time, like, oh, this person changed like this. They say it as like a negative thing, but it's actually just realistic. People change. We all change. Okay? So change itself is not necessarily a bad thing. Does that make sense? So again, we have to understand our goal is not to find the perfect person because there is no such thing. No. Okay, that's very important. That really, okay, that doesn't mean, so what I'm saying is don't lower your expectation. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying get rid of your unrealistic expectation. Unrealistic meaning that they have to be perfect, like looking, that they cannot have flaws, they have to always be happy, they have to be intelligent all the time, they have to support you 100%. In that sense, I'm saying those are not, they might have one or two things or even 5 things, but even then, you have to understand they might lose some of these things as life goes on. But if you think, oh, because they have it now, they have to continue to have it forever, or I didn't sign up for this and I'm going to get a divorce because of, in that kind of sense, get rid of that kind of expectation. That's what we're saying. Okay? So I'm not saying lower your expectation at all. Okay? We're saying keep your expectation, good expectations, but unrealistic ones, you have to understand. Yeah, that's what we're saying.
So like it could be like a funny person who's very interesting, and then later they're just very serious, but you're still just supposed to stay with them.
yeah.
And that's what marriage, that's what commitment is, right? It's not, and that's why the vow itself does not say, oh, I will love you only if you stay a funny person, right? The whole point of the vow is, even for the worst, I'm going to stay with you. And so that's the vow of a marriage vow. But yeah, or like even maybe you thought she was funny or he was funny, but then you get married and it's like, this person is never serious now, all right? It's like it's too funny or it's too much now, right? So again, you have to and that's why again, this is the whole idea is not don't get married, but I think also be serious in who you're reaching out as well. Especially as Christians. Christians are very, very, I mean, a lot of Christians are getting divorced, but Christians, I mean, Jesus made it very clear that divorce is a no-no. Okay? So that means you have to take marriage more seriously as well.
What if they just get lazy? Like, what if it's like woman married to a guy and the guy gets lazy?
No, absolutely. Those things can happen. And I'm not saying like you need to just accept it. We're not saying that at all. We're saying those are things that you need to work on and hopefully you guys can work on. But for you to just say, have the unrealistic expectation, this person needs to be perfect. If this person makes a little mistake, then I'm out of this. Like this contract is voided kind of a thing. That's not going to, then if you go in with that kind of mindset, marriage is never going to work. But the whole, our modern day marriage, we think of it like that. That's what the problem is. But if we go in thinking, oh, we are imperfect people, then we could work with that. We're actually going in with realistic expectations. But I'm still saying before marriage, I'm willing to still be committed to this person. Yeah, that's what marriage actually is. But okay, so we're getting to that beauty of that. That's actually, for some of you, that might not be beautiful, but that's actually really beautiful. We'll get there. There is a profound biblical reason why two people are never compatible. The two people who enter into marriage are spiritually broken by sin, which, among other things, means to be self-centered. Okay? So our understanding of human nature is that all of us are sinners. So none of us should be surprised that we're marrying sinners. Okay? And that's why we have relational issues. Not because relationships are hard, but because we're sinners. We all have issues. So that means, even within marriage, just because you love them, that doesn't mean that you're not going to have issues. Because they're self-centered and they're selfish, you're going to have issues with them. Okay? It will never be easy to live lovingly and well with a selfish human being. The biblical doctrine of sin explains why marriage, more than anything else that is good and important in this fallen world, is so painful and hard. Work, if you guys remember, even work, when we did our work series, or even if you weren't here, if you look at Genesis 3, we actually see that God gives us work. So work in it, because most people normally think of work as like something negative or laborious, right? But if you think about it, when we go to heaven, most people think, oh, we're just going to be chilling and drinking pina colada and just like people like angels fanning us kind of heaven. But we're probably going to be working. Why? Because God actually gave Adam and Eve jobs and work. Okay? So what I'm trying to say is even work, which is a good thing, it gives us pain. In marriage, it's a good thing, but because of sin, it's a lot of work. Relationship is a beautiful thing, but there's a lot of work. Does that make sense? Why? Because sin gets in the way. So this, for us as Christians, we should never be deluded into thinking, I must find the perfect person. Because there is no such thing. Okay? Everybody is a sinner. Everybody's broken in certain ways. Okay, good. We'll get there. So we must remember that the problem is not marriage itself. Okay? According to Genesis, we were made for marriage, and marriage was made for us. Genesis 3 tells us that marriage, along with every other aspect of human life, has been broken because of sin. If our view of marriage is too romantic and idealistic, then we underestimate the influence of sin on human life. If they are too pessimistic and cynical, we misunderstand the marriage's divine origin. Okay, this is one of the reasons you don't have to get married, but God actually designed us for relationships and marriage, actually. Okay, because again, a lot of people actually think Adam actually started complaining and said, God, I'm really lonely. Can you find me a chick? But actually, it was God who actually said it's not good for men to be alone. So what that means is, in an ideal world, right, perfect world, all of us would actually be married. Okay, of course, in a sinful world, like later we're going to talk about singleness as well. Okay, marriage is not an option; it's not a mandatory thing anymore, because we're in a sinful world. Okay, but again, the idea is that marriage is part of it, and that's why we talk about marriage, romance. These things are not necessarily bad things. So again, one bad extreme would be marriage is everything; it has to fulfill everything. That's unrealistic. But to say like forget marriage, then that's not good either, because marriage is part of what God has given to us. Does that make sense? And same thing with like food, right? There's a lot of bad food out there, and food has destroyed a lot of people's lives. But that doesn't mean that we just go, screw you, food. We have to pick the right food, and we have to learn to have good relationship with food. And same thing with marriage and relationships as well. Okay. Okay, let's take a break really quickly, and why don't you guys go in? Any thoughts? Any questions? We have 2 more slides left. Go for it. Okay, let's come back together, and then let me finish up, and then you guys can go back into more discussion. All right. The great solution. Okay? If you understand this, this will greatly, greatly help not only your marriage, but also your relationships as well. All relationships. Okay? So if you can understand this and apply this to all your relationships, I promise you all your relationships will be very difficult still, but very, very, very fruitful and full of joy. Gold can come out of it.
Really?
Yeah. But it will, I'm not saying it's going to be easy all of a sudden. This is it. This is what Paul says. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word. This is a profound mystery. But I am talking about Christ and the church. So do this. Okay? Love your spouse, or love your brother or sister, or your friend, the same way Jesus loved you. Okay? So did Jesus come and say, all right, where's all my perfect people? Okay? Or did Jesus say, come and said, okay, all of these fools need to worship me and obey me so that I can be fulfilled? Or I am emotionally be satisfied now. No, that's not why Jesus came. Does that make sense? Jesus came and looked for imperfect people to love them still and to embrace them still. Why? To help them and to make them perfect. Does that make sense? So if we approach our relationships, our marriage, not as, okay, I need to find the perfect person to satisfy me. Instead, we say, even though my friend or my sister or my spouse is not perfect, how can I still love them and embrace them so that they can grow and I can grow? Then that's going to make your relationships amazing. Again, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard still. But again, we follow Jesus' method. Then again, we could see amazing things happening in our relationships as well. So we'll finish with this. So what do we need to make marriage work? You need to know the great solution, the gospel, and how it gives you both the power and the pattern for your marriage. What do we mean by power and pattern? Okay, let's see it.
The reason that marriage is so painful and yet wonderful is because it is a reflection of the gospel, which is painful and wonderful at once. The gospel is this: we are more sinful and flawed in ourselves than we ever dared believe. Yet at this very same time, we are more loved and accepted in Jesus Christ than we ever dared hope. This is the only kind of relationship that will really transform.
Right. So when we look at our relationship with Jesus, we clearly, all of us, all have, we all know how, if we, at least if we hold on to this, how it can transform our hearts, right? Because when we understand that somebody could actually love us for who we are, that transforms us. So imagine your marriage or your relationships looking like that. Right? That you can come to a person not because you're perfect, but even though you are imperfect, you see your spouse still embracing you and loving you and supporting you. Or your brother or sister or your friends actually doing that. Okay, so again, it's this idea of even though we are imperfect, we could show each other Jesus' love. And through that, we could actually understand God's love even better through our relationship. So our marriage or relationship is a little example of the relationship between us and God. It's a reflection, if that makes sense. So in that sense, that's really beautiful, yeah.
Doesn't both parties have to work on it though? It can't be just one. Or can it be just one-sided?
Right, so again, I would say it would be maximally most beautiful if both of them are like that. And that's why I think as Christians, we can never, I don't think, and Paul, throughout the Bible, I think it makes it very clear that we need to marry Christians.
But even Christians
Yeah.
are not.
Of course, right. But I'm talking about Christians in the sense that, in the definition of like, they are looking at Jesus. Not like yeah, I'm a Christian because I grew up in a Christian home and my mama and daddy are Christian. Not like that, right? But they're like really seeking God,
So both parties
right? That would be most ideal. Most ideal, right? And so in that sense, I don't think you guys should just marry anybody. I actually think you guys should marry Christians. Not because Christian boys or Christian guys are better, not because of that. Okay, I'm not saying that whatsoever. Okay, but I'm saying that because you're actually looking at the right solution. That's why. Okay, does that make sense? That's the difference. So in that sense, I'm saying don't lower your expectation in that sense. No, you should have very high expectation in that sense. But I think it could still work even if it's one person. I think so. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be easy by any means. It's very, very difficult, right? But I still think that it is possible. Not with your own love. If it's your own love, it's going to end. That marriage is over or relationship is over. But if you are able to, because God's love for you, we're the same thing, right? We're in the same exact situation where God is pouring out love to us all the time and we're just like, oh no, we're not trying at all. But the only reason why it could work for us, as long as we look at Jesus, is because we have unlimited source of love. That means even if our spouse or our other relationship person is not necessarily being fair and giving the love that we deserve, we can still choose to love our spouse or the other person. So in that sense, again, I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying I think it's a possibility. I think there is hope. Whereas if it's by yourself, I don't think there's any hope at all.
But the women can lose the marriage.
But I think when you're going into the marriage, you really need to see if that person is also putting that kind of mindset about marriage. But there are times that the person doesn't want to, right? So I think if that person is like always like that, then you shouldn't marry that person. But then there are times that either because of the situation or because of the person's character or whatever the reason is, there are times that the person doesn't try the same way you do. Then you gotta still be able to work on it alone still. Yeah. And I think in that sense, he's saying it can work.
Yeah, in the end, I mean, I'm not saying that person is going to suddenly transform because of your love, but at least you're giving that person an opportunity. But if that person continues to shut down and continues to be negative or have certain addictions and is not willing to look to the solution, then of course, in the end, it's not going to work out.
Living
Right?
with Christ, that means that you're humbling yourself before a supernatural being. So you are trying to change yourself. I think there's like a distinction in that regard.
Great question. Okay, let's continue. Let's finish, and then we'll have more discussion. Okay.
Love without truth is sentimentality. It supports and affirms us, but it keeps us in denial about our flaws.
Okay, does that make sense? So if there's love but no truth, we just go, I just love you. I just love you. Love, love, love. That's just sentimentality. That's superficial stuff. Okay?
Truth without love is harshness. It gives us information, but in such a way that we cannot really hear it. God's saving love in Christ, however, is marked by both radical truthfulness about who we are and yet also radical unconditional commitment to us.
Yeah. And again, this is why the gospel or the good news about Jesus is the most beautiful story. Okay, the most beautiful thing. I mean, and this is not just, you just watch any movie, right? I mean, two perfect people loving each other, anybody could do that. But when you watch a drama or movie and somebody says, even though you're imperfect, I can still love you, then that captivates our heart. Okay? Why? Because that's the that's the love that we all desire. All right, let's finish.
The hard times of marriage perhaps experience more of this transforming love. But a good marriage will also be a place where we experience more of this kind of transforming love.
Right. So again, if you are having relationship, okay, especially marriage, but even within a relationship, friendship, when you are going through the hard time again, then you realize, okay, that we're dealing with difficult people. But again, we also understand, even through the hard time, it's really beautiful because we're a hard person to deal with for God too. But He still loves us. So even in the hard time, we understand God's love more. But in good times, then we could see what relationship, marriage really looks like, and how God gave us this so that we can flourish as well. We can actually grow in character and in acceptance as well. Does that make sense? So that's really, really beautiful. So in essence, even the hard times and good times with God, relationships can be a very, very beautiful thing. Let's go into our time of discussion, and then we'll finish.